So more on the law. Joining us for that is trial attorney Misty Marris. So let's begin with the focus of Trump's argument here. I mean, there's a lot in here. He's a trailblazer in social media, therefore he knows more. He's a great negotiator, which is something that he says about really virtually every issue on the planet. He could find a better way forward. He sets aside the First Amendment arguments for now, arguing for this delay here. What's your review of the legal arguments he makes?
Well, Jim, very unusual legal arguments, to say the least. And let's talk about what the legal standard is to seek a stay. The legal standard is irreparable harm. That's one aspect. That's one prong. There you can talk about the First Amendment issue. That is a very valid concern and something the Supreme Court can take up as this case works its way through the appellate courts. The second is likelihood of success on the merits. Right. We see him actually in writing put that aside and say we're not really going to comment on whether or not this is violative of First Amendment, whether or not national security concerns actually overcome that burden of strict scrutiny. We're not even going to talk about it, that prong that's required. Instead, we hear about his negotiating skills. Instead, we hear about how he had great success using TikTok during the election. So to me, and from the legal perspective, that is not sufficient to fulfill that second prong, seeking a stay. And again, this doesn't mean that there isn't an inquiry by the Supreme Court as this case works its way through the courts and the appellate system as to whether or not there's an issue with that First Amendment concern. It's just about whether or not it's actually put on pause against the will of Congress and the most recent decision at the appellate division.
The president has a role, the sitting president has a role in enforcement in this. Is that, in effect, the president-elect's best argument here, that this goes into effect on January 19th, and guess who's president on January 20th?
Well, certainly that would be of a practical concern because the DOJ is going to be very different as soon as the Trump administration takes over. And will there be a directive to say, okay, this law is on the books, Congress has passed it, it's signed into law, but don't enforce it? Because enforcement is left up to the branch, to the Department of Justice in this instance.
I'm not a lawyer, but I've watched this court a lot in recent years because this court has been involved in a lot of stories.
We've covered quite a few, yes.
And I've seen this court regularly say it wants congressional action, right? When they don't want things decided in the courts, they want congressional action. They tend to have deference to that. They have a lot of deference as well to executive power. We've seen that as well. Here you have a case where this was bipartisan congressional action. Are they going to be swayed in that direction, or are they going to be swayed in the president-elect's direction?
Yeah, certainly. Separation of powers issues, right, that we've covered many times, and deference to those congressional acts. And Jim, especially when you talk about issues of national security. That's even a heightened level of deference to the president and to Congress to act under those issues and those concerns. So what will they do here? I think we've seen some interesting decisions come out of this court, but if they're following what we believe these prior decisions are and what the law is on a stay, I would say it's denied, but I can't make any guarantees on that.
And we should know that the national security basis of this has not changed. The intelligence community has not changed its assessment of TikTok's threat. All that has changed is the president-elect's view. Misty Marris, thanks so much.
Thank you.